I mean, if you're along and you're still desperately waiting for Monday and praying that the data is going to be good, I mean, I just like investing is not about praying and hoping. It's about taking intelligent risk reward decisions. And here's the data I wanted to show you guys. Okay, so this story all started. Let me do these terrible drawings again. I actually have a pad to draw with, but I don't use it. So this data all started years ago. There was a healthcare data analysis that was done. It was just torrents of data, like 50 million patients, okay? And they went into this database. This is how you draw a database in computer science. It's very scientific, in fact. And you Miro or diagram enjoyers know what I'm talking about here. Very, very scientific. So this is the database. Now, you go into a list of 50 million people, and you find that, and it's the same fucking story every time, and nobody ever learns, but we did this with cassava. I feel like I'm repeating myself. You go into this 50 million person database, and you sort it, and you say, which group of patients of these 50 million, sorted by ICD-9 codes, okay? Whatever, ICD-9 or ICD-10. Sort it and tell me which diagnosis of patient had the biggest decrease in dementia given an intervention. You can do this with SQL. And boop, 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 out comes out. It turns out that people who took TNF-alpha inhibitors that had rheumatoid arthritis versus people who did not take TNF-alpha inhibitors who had rheumatoid arthritis had a decrease in dementia. Now, again, you have to be half a retard to think that this is causal. But there are people who are full retards, not just half a retard. Just because you see a list and you sort it, you can sort it, you can press this button. There will be, by definition, there will be a winner and a loser. There will be a situation where it looks like it's causing Alzheimer's, and there'll be a situation where it looks like it's removing Alzheimer's. If you score it from 1 to 50 million, you will get that, or whatever, how many ICD-9 entries there are. And this is called multiple error correction. It's a simple concept in statistics. For example, Bonferroni correction. I gave a talk about this at Harvard 10 years ago. It is the most common mental error people make. They ascribe causality where it doesn't exist. If I looked at a histogram of my live streams to try to figure out where the most viewers watched, what minute and what second, and I see that at 3 minutes, this was the time that most viewers watched, and I look back at the content to see what they liked the most about the content, and I tried to recreate that content, that's probably more causal than this. It was more like if I flipped a coin 10 million times, and I found the distribution, the stretches of times in that coin where I was above 50%, I would say those are my good times, and I need to do those at that exact hour. Or if I looked at pi, and I tried to find a stretch of digits, in fact, there's a proof that says any stretch of digits you can imagine, like 666, will occur in pi. In fact, 10 sixes, 50 sixes, it'll eventually occur. So, we are often fooled by randomness, is my point. And, this study convinced some people that maybe TNF-alpha inhibitors reduce Alzheimer's, even though it's a retrospective study that has no causal inference. This has been disproved many, many times. And I'm going to show you the main disproof of it. But this was what started all this nonsense. Where's the main disproof? Well, I'm so glad you asked. It was called the RESIST study. And the RESIST study was done recently. And the problem with Bayesian inference is that recent things tend to not be quickly absorbed by people. There's often a inability to quickly understand and absorb new information. That's why markets are inefficient, I think. But here's a study. They said 251 patients with rheumatoid arthritis, same thing that started this whole mess. People with rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune disease, they take TNF-alpha inhibitors versus a standard old-style drug, and they did 18-month assessments. No significant changes was observed in either treatment group. No cognitive decline in participants being treated with TNF and DMARDs. No delta. And in fact, the DMARDs don't separate from placebo either. Prednisone, for example, is one such DMARD, but there are many others. Hydroxychloroquine, sulfasalazine, methotrexate's the main one. No separation. In fact, DMARDs were better than TNF in some cases. There's an even worse, there's so many other worse things here. Yeah, there are not too many biotech experts that want to talk about this stuff. You know, you've got the big funds, RTW, Baker Brothers, Perceptive. I think these are the kings of biotech, more or less. I mean, I'm sure there's others, and I hope I'm not insulting anybody by excluding them off the list. But these are three of the kings of biotech. They don't want to talk about, you know, their investments, and that makes sense as to why, right? I mean, they got to serve their clients, not you. So it stands to reason. They're busy too, you know. They're making plenty of money doing their job, so you can't blame them. And they're not always right either, right? They're very good, but they're not always right. So I want to show you, you know, like a tree of autoimmune nodes. And these are not going to be labeled, but you can imagine them being labeled with TNF, with IL-6, with all kinds of things. And this is, you know, a little bit about how biology kind of works. You have this tree structure. I've been doing a lot of computer science lately, so I've been in tree structures, but you can call this a graph. And this is not exactly the way it works, because you also have some overlap, like this node might be shared by two things, like P38 or something like that. Okay, and so we're going to make one of these nodes green for TNF-alpha. Okay, so this is TNF-alpha. And the other problem, there's so many logical flaws in the bull thesis here. It's just like embarrassing. But that's why the stock's a microcap shitty stock that has no investors. But it takes a special kind of idiot to be bullish. So pretend this is autoimmunity and inflammation in the body. And this is TNF. And you say the only way to stop Alzheimer's is by blockading this. We need to block this. This is the place where we need to inhibit. These are the nodes that matter. Forget the fact that these are all intersected. They actually don't look like this. In reality, all of these nodes kind of come together to form a very weird structure. But let's assume this is the case. Well, my first point here was that, well, prednisone covers all of these nodes, right? That's why it's kind of the master autoimmune drug. It covers everything. And the obvious reaction, look, I've been around biotech longer than almost anybody here. I mean, a handful of guys that I mentioned, even those three master funds, there's only 3 or 4 guys that are older than me at this point. Prednisone is not TNF. That's why it's the yellow and not the green. But it includes the green. But prednisone does not work. Okay, fine. What about this guy? Well, this guy includes the green, but it also includes some other things. Maybe this guy will work. Nope, that blue guy didn't work either. Well, all right, well, what about this guy? This guy's downstream of TNF. It's called COX-2. Let's just inhibit that. Let me draw the blue box. The blue box didn't work. Okay, so a superset didn't work. A bigger superset didn't work. What about a subset? Let's do a subset. The subset, COX-2 inhibitors, that didn't work either. So the superset doesn't work. The subsets don't work. They even did one that's kind of like this. Like I said, this was sort of, to me, P38. This was steroids. This was COX-2. None of these improved Alzheimer's. So you want to tell me that it's this exact box of the nodes that we have to hit, even though these are massively redundant, they do the same thing, they're autocrine, they're sort of self-amplifying. No, it has to be the green box. If you do the yellow box, that's a problem. If you do the blue box, that's a problem. If you do the pink box, that's a problem. Purple box, that's a problem. It has to be the green box. You're starting to strain credulity here, because if you look at the rest of the way medicine works, let's take rheumatoid arthritis for that matter. If you give a JAK inhibitor, this is just basic medicine. If you've been around the block, you know this stuff. If you give a JAK inhibitor, does it work in RA? Yes, it does. If you give a TNF alpha, this is the green, does it work in RA? Yes, it does. If you give a P38, no, it doesn't. That was a surprise when that happened. If you give steroids, yes, it does. COX-2, more or less, maybe that's in the middle, but more or less doesn't really work. So you can kind of see, all right, well, sometimes it works. But here in Alzheimer's, you want to say, no, steroids don't work, P38 doesn't work, COX-2 doesn't work, JAK doesn't work, but it has to be TNF that works. How does that make sense? Where does that make sense? And of course, there's some preclinical studies that you can look at that you think maybe that makes sense. Those have flaws too. Those have massive flaws. There was a study done that showed the opposite. Somebody said, that Shkreli is that kid that said actually in school. Yeah, that's my job. My job is to figure out the actually you're wrong. I'm going to take your money. That is exactly what I do. Thank you. I don't want to take too much of a victory lap before Monday because data's not out yet, but here's why I went short. What do you mean? Are we invading Canada? Let's go. Yeah, don't talk shit about me. I have an exquisite nose for people talking shit about me. I can hear it a mile away. What's that? Somebody says I'm stupid. What? So there are a number of really amazing. Yes, they've seen the data, for crying out loud. I've read some of these papers. And I can show you some fascinating results. That take apart the preclinical, and then we can take apart the PK too. Look, drug development's hard. I don't fault anybody for getting it wrong. I've gotten my fair share of drug development wrong too. So this is a Spanish group that did this. There's a different form of this out. Hold on. I can actually just kind of do it through here. Okay, so yeah, here they block TNFR2. They do some fairly interesting work here. So here they show that you have to block TNFR2 to rescue synaptosome integrity in mice. And this is the exact opposite of what the company wants to claim, that you must block TNF2 in certain places, that it's causing bad inflammation. The company claims that TNF2 is the hero in the story. But unfortunately, this data proves, or suggests at least, otherwise. So there's a lot of nitpicking here, but there's a couple of really fascinating supplementary data too. There's some that just made me go wild, because they showed that TNF2 agonism does not reduce A beta 42. And then the PK stuff is also pretty funny. So anyway, we'll see what happens. But it's I don't know if I have more diligence to do here. This is just pretty much a open and short, open and shut. Is that right? Man, Circle was a wild ride. A couple of us were shorted. I never shorted. I was too distracted with all kinds of things that I'm doing here. But Circle, we went long. We caught some of this, but we missed the most of the rocket ship. At least I did. Some of you guys maybe held on. It went from the deal price at 30 to 300. Now it's almost half of that, 180. Oh, I bought that dude's website. So what is he? This guy. He's been saying that INmune is a unicorn? Oh, this was a good pun. Flowers for Alzion, because there's a great book called Flowers for Algernon. So that's actually a fairly good pun. I'll give you that. Carl Kestens, that's his name. I mean, I don't know why this guy has real estate in my head, because he's an amateur investor, but he was so certain that INmune, the unicorn in INmune, a good Alzheimer's drug, is worth far beyond $100 billion. Well, just to make sure he doesn't delete all of his stuff, I have purchased a website called carlkestens.com. It will be launching soon. We will make sure that forevermore we have Carl Kestens' great stock picks immortalized right here on this website. Just so we never forget, Oh, I've invited him on the show. I don't have a show, by the way, but I've invited him to chat. He's a little bit afraid. And I can be very imposing. You wouldn't want to cross me in a courtroom. But he's a lawyer. I'm just what do I know? I'm not going to say character attacks. I'm just going to put what he wrote up, just so he can't delete it. I've asked him to come on 1,000,000 times. He can't. It's a Dunning-Kruger. The guy just started looking at bio. Same thing as Matt Nacktrab. This is my I don't know. It's like a side hustle for me, just taking these guys' money. The Dunning-Kruger guys who show up. You've probably seen it at a poker table. A guy shows up, says, "Yeah, I know how to count my outs. I know how to bluff. I know a little game theory, optimal poker. Let me sit down with, who's this bum, Phil Hellmuth? I got you. Why is my chip stack dropping? I can't believe it. It must be an error. Let me go upstairs and get more chips. Tray of chips. Cash me in, dealer." Dealer's looking at you like, "Bruh, maybe you want to take a seat, bruh. Go home. Come back tomorrow. I got this. Give me the cards." 2 aces, huh? All in. Phil Hellmuth's like, "Okay, I know this guy has 2 aces. What can beat 2 aces? 7, 8 diamonds. You know what? I call. He called! I'm 60-40 to win! Oh man, diamond. Ah, it's over. How'd you know? Do you have infrared vision? Did you look at my cards?